And right before the invasion, on the eve of the invasion, this show that was the top-rated show for MSNBC was dumped. Phil Donahue was kicked out. And that's the issue I was raising. So when Chris, countered when I said it would be nice to be celebrating with Phil Donahue, I talked about the secret MSNBC, the NBC memo that had come out that we had gotten hold of, that I wrote about in my book, that said that when we were moving into war, they couldn't have this anti-war face as the face of their flagship show when the other networks were waving the American flag. In Jeff's book and in his speeches, he often talks about what it meant to do these broadcasts that had anti-war voices. Every time you had someone who was anti-war, you had to have two people who were pro-war in order to even get by as long as they did. Well, on Friday, we're in the middle of a 70-city tour, and it's wonderful to be here in Ithaca on the day that Standing Up to the Madness is coming out. Yesterday, we were in Washington, D.C., and I was with Seymour Hersh at Georgetown. And at the beginning of last night's event, we honored Father Dan Berrigan. He was too ill to come out last night to the Jesuit university that was honoring him, Georgetown. But, I can't say enough about what the movement of resistance that he represented has meant for this country, and how shameful it is that he is rarely, and those voices, like Peter DeMott's here, a voice that we will sorely miss, are so rarely heard in the media. These brave souls who've risked years in jail to bring out a different view of America to the rest of the world, one that deeply believes in turning swords into plowshares. I think that is an image of America that would certainly increase our national security and our national standing in the world. We'll go back tomorrow to New York, and on Thursday, Glenn and I will do a taping of Bill Moyer's Journal for Friday night. I hope you all tune in and let him know how you feel. The networks need to know how you respond to different voices on television. And then on Thursday night, I'll be in Cambridge. Friday morning, we'll be doing the broadcast from Boston, and my guest for the hour will be Noam Chomsky. So tune in to that. Jeff is often fond of saying that, how they always had to have two pro-war advocates on for any anti-war voice they had. We don't have a very large studio when we interview Noam Chomsky in Boston, but as Jeff said, if it were MSNBC, they would need 23 people to counter Phil, to counter Noam, and they never had a studio big enough. But very seriously, we need a media that presents the full spectrum of opinion. We need a media, not only public broadcasting, but the networks that follow in the tradition of Pacifica Radio. Pacifica was founded 60 years ago on April 15th. I'll be in Berkeley celebrating 60 years of Pacifica, the first station, KPFA. And many of you, I know the tradition of Pacifica. It was founded by Lou Hill, a war resister, who came out of the detention camps and said there's got to be a media outlet not run by corporations that profit from war, but run by journalists and artists. And that's how Pacifica was born. The first station, KPFA, in 1949. The second station, KPFK, in 1959. WBAI in New York in 1960. In Houston, KPFT in 1970, and WPFW in Washington in 1977, the 5 Pacifica stations. KPFT went on the air in 1970 in Houston, Texas. It's the only radio station in the country. Within a few months, it was blown up by the Ku Klux Klan. They strapped dynamite to the base of the transmitter, blew it to smithereens. The silver lining was that, obviously Pacifica doesn't have money for advertising. It certainly blew it into the consciousness of the potential listeners of Houston. And when they got back on their feet, when they rebuilt their transmitter, the Klan blew it up again. Now, I don't know if it was the Exalted Cyclops or the Grand Dragon. I often confuse their titles. But he said it was their proudest act. And I think that's because they understood how dangerous Pacifica is. Dangerous because it simply allows people to speak for themselves. And when you hear a Palestinian child or an Israeli mother, when you hear an Afghan grandma or an Iraqi grandfather, you say, it sounds like my baby, it sounds like my bubba. It sounds like someone I know. You don't have to agree with everything you hear. But we need a media that builds bridges between communities, doesn't advocate the bombing of bridges. When you hear someone speaking for themselves, it breaks down the stereotypes and the caricatures that fuel the hate groups. It's the beginning of a dialogue of understanding. I see the media as a huge kitchen table that stretches across the globe, that we all sit around and debate and discuss the most important issues of the day: war and peace, life and death. And anything less than that is a disservice to the servicemen and women who are sent off to kill or be killed. They can't have these debates on military bases. They rely on us in civilian society to have those discussions that determine whether they will live or die. Anything less than that is a disservice to a democratic society.